Film one, Sons of the Desert. I was a big Laurel and Hardy fan growing up. I always remember my parents loved Laurel and Hardy, and then around Christmas, around 2000, 2001, there was a season of Laurel and Hardy films on BBC Two. So every time I hear the do, I always think of Christmas. I think Sons of the Desert is maybe the tightest of all the films, because a lot of the times in their films the plots don't matter. It's quite regular that they'll just throw away the plot at the end and you're like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Sons of the Desert I think is really tight, and I think it's one of the things I love about Laurel and Hardy, and one of the things that I talk about in my book is that they feel like a married couple, and even if they're married in the stories, they never want to spend time with the wife. They always want to spend time with each other. There's other films that maybe I think do this a lot more explicitly, like Their First Mistake, in which they adopt a baby, and it has to be on purpose. It's all too on the nose not to be on purpose. This is a bit more like that as well, but not as explicit. And they're in a fraternity, start off in a fraternity, which, there's a reason that there's a big frat boy gay porn industry. There's something very gay about fraternities in general. And then they leave the fraternity. They're going to go this big trip. Ollie's wife doesn't want him to go. He makes up an illness, and where the only cure is that he has to go to Honolulu. This is very, very silly, but it makes sense in the film, and it's just really tight, and in a way that, not just Laurel and Hardy films in general, and that period of this type, the sort of comedy films, the Charlie Chaplins, the Marx Brothers, the Three Stooges, that they weren't very tight with the plot, but this is one of the few examples, I think, where it's very tight, very concise, really enjoyable. Definitely their best film, I think. There's a reason their fan club is named after this film. Film number two, The Blues Brothers. This is a more obvious choice, I think, but it was still my favorite film. It was the film that it's one of those films where I can put it on and literally mouth the script along with the film. And it's a really strange film, actually. It's a musical, but not really. It's a comedy, but there's no real jokes in it. I remember always assuming that Jake and Elwood were blood brothers by family. It's only when I read the sleeve notes of the first album, which came out long before the film, that they were just these two orphan kids who bonded together when they cut their finger with a guitar string that was supposedly owned by Elmore James, and that was for all intents and purposes, it was a marriage ceremony, a voodoo witchy kind of marriage ceremony. The band in this film are actually solid. People think of it as a joke, but actually you've got Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn from Booker T and the MGs, who, Green Onions, they were the house band at Stax. Steve Cropper wrote Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, Knock on Wood, In the Midnight Hour. The horn section are from New York, so you've got this Memphis rhythm section with this New York horn section, which is a really unique sound. Even though they're doing these standards, it's still got a sound that it's a legit band. It's not like the Commitments or something where it is just, quite workmanlike. There's some soul in there that I think gets a bit overlooked. And this is where I just, the sometimes my favorite music, the soul of America's classic R&B. This is where I was introduced to James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Cab Calloway, all those people. I think it's an enjoyable ride. There's nothing like it. I don't know what kind of film it's to this day, what kind of film it is. But it's one of those films that you're always going to have a good time watching. And I just adore it. And even though by all accounts, everybody says John Belushi was like, oh, he was a great guy, he was wonderful. And then you read biographies of him and just all his actions are just awful. But this is one of those films I could just watch any time of the year, any time of the day. It's a fun ride. Film number 3. I'm going to start this by telling you the story of Paula Barbieri. Paula Barbieri she came from an abusive household. She got away. She went to Europe for a modeling opportunity, and she met the first man who ever showed her any respect. And that man's name was Roman Polanski. Apparently, he never touched her. Go figure. He was a nice mentor to her, apparently. She returned to America, where she started dating Dolph Lundgren. But that didn't last very long because he cheated on her with Grace Jones. Then she met the man that would be her on and off boyfriend for a couple of years. He'd just gotten divorced. And they were on and off for like 2 or 3 years. And that man's name was O.J. Simpson. And this is the film I want to talk about. It is made in America. I wasn't sure whether to count this as a film or not because it's an ESPN production. When it's broadcast on TV, it's presented as a documentary series. But they did enough screenings where it was able to qualify for Academy Awards. So it did win the Best Director Award at the Academy Awards that year. It is probably the best documentary I've ever seen on any subject. It is not... True crime has been a big thing over the last few years, and it's not a true crime documentary. This is a documentary about everything that America, but by extension the West, is completely and utterly obsessed with. It's true crime, but it's also celebrity, it's also race, it's also misogyny, it's also sports. I'm not a sports guy, but I appreciate it's the cultural cachet that sports has, how they all interlock with each other. It's 7 hours long. I remember putting it on, going, I'll watch it for a bit and then I'll finish it tomorrow. And then 4 a.m, I was still engrossed in the end of this documentary. It is just the most astonishing. It's rare that you get a documentary, I think, that doubles as art in its own right. And I absolutely think this is one of the few examples of that. And if you're wondering what happened to Paula Barbieri, she left OJ the morning of the murders for the final time because she'd fallen in love with Michael Bolton. Film number 4, Streets of Fire. This is directed by Walter Hill, who famously directed The Warriors. It does feel a lot like The Warriors in a lot of ways, but if Jim Steinman wrote the music for it. I love a rock and roll movie, I think. I love the feel of a rock and roll movie and everything. I guess, I don't know, is it frowned upon to love a vibes movie? Because I feel like whenever I see people talk about vibes movies, they're kind of piffy about them. But I love a vibes movie, and I love its atmosphere, and it draws me in more than plot a lot of the time. I think it is such a... I love a movie that couldn't exist at any other time, and I don't think this could exist at any other time. It's named after a Bruce Springsteen song as well, and I'm a big Springsteen fan, so that's always lovely. They couldn't get the rights to the song, which is why Jim Steinman wrote a second song for the film. It's got songs by Tom Petty and Stevie Nicks in there. It's a really interesting combination. It's that vision of the future too, which is part 50s, part 80s, part dystopian, and you see that a lot. In fact, I don't know where it started exactly, but it makes sense that it would be around this era when, the kids who grew up in the 50s are now making the movies, and there's a nostalgic pull back to that kind of 50s thing. And Jim Steinman, as a writer, I think he's always harking back to that youth. It's a really strange... I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember that it's one of those things where I'm not sure if the acting is supposed to be bad or not, because the line reads bizarre in some cases, and there's almost like really everyone's really wooden in a strange way, but it's so pronounced that I think this must have been on purpose. And you've got the speaking of Springsteen, Michael Paré, the guy who stars in the film, he was also in a film called Eddie and the Cruisers, where he plays a very Springsteen-esque rock star, but from the 60s, and he goes missing, and he's presumed dead, and everybody's trying to figure out what happened to his final records. He did that and this very close together, and just kind of fell off the face of the earth, which is a shame because he looks stunning all the way through this film, even if his line reads are completely off. It's one of those things that it's a very acquired taste, I think, but if you're in the right mood for it, it's a good time. You'll come out of this smiling, I think. And I don't think they really make films like this anymore. Nobody's going to put money behind something. You can tell it's expensive. It's not a cheaply made film, even though it flopped super, super hard. It's a rock and roll fable, and I think that sums it up quite nicely, I think. Film number 5, the last one. I'm going to go for maybe another slightly obvious one, but Alien is my favorite franchise of all time. If I could just pick all 4 of the original films, I probably would. Even the bad ones, I'll get to that. But the original Alien, I think, is... God, if I didn't love stupid stuff so much, it might be my favorite film. It's my favorite non-stupid film of all time. The franchise in general, I think it's got everything that a franchise should have. It's got one... The first film is an absolute masterpiece of suspense. The second one is a masterpiece of, shoot 'em up action. The third one is a behind-the-scenes nightmare that's great to read up on. And the fourth one is so stupid that you can't fault it. And I think the combination of that is just, I think that's why I find it so fascinating. I love franchises that start so high and fall so far. And I'm not snippy about it, so it's all right. It's another Walter Hill, actually. He produced it, director of Streets of Fire, which was film number 4. I don't think there's much I can say about this that everybody else has already said, but, I talk a little bit about, when people talk about Alien as a sort of queer reading, I usually hear it about Ellen Ripley and the Siggy Weave, the switch in genders and from what people expected in the late 70s from a film like this. But I think of it more with the alien itself. The xenomorph is probably the most grotesquely sexual creature that's ever been created. Everything about it, the protruding mouth that looks like it's constantly filleting, and it's slobbering with all the things. You're looking around and it looks like all the doors are look like vaginas in the background and stuff. And the assault of the face hugger on John Hurt is a sexual assault. And I think that's why the crux between that and Ellen Ripley, I think that's why queer audiences have continued to flock to Alien in a way that maybe some similar sort of sci-fi type films they wouldn't have. But Alien is one of those films where a few times a year I will break it out, and often end up going through the entire franchise and the 2-hour documentaries on the on the anthology. That was the other thing. It was in the very early days of DVD when I really got into Alien. It was when the quadrilogy came out, and that was just the gold standard for DVD at the time. The extras were like each film, there was 2 versions of each film, some authorized, some not, by the directors, and the bonus features on those, I miss that so much. You don't get these great bonus features anymore, where the 2-3-hour documentaries, which were huge productions in themselves, and I guess maybe there's no money to actually do that anymore. But yeah, I remember not even just watching the film, but devouring the special features on each disc as well. I said there's nothing I can say about this that you don't already know. Like, it's been one of the most written about films of all time, but I couldn't pick 5 films without picking Alien. Before I go, I'm just going to pimp out my book. This is Rainbows in the Rough, The Unlikely Queer Icons That Shaped the Closeted Queen. It is about when I was growing up, I wasn't... Now, Love Kylie, love Britney, love Madge, love Cher, love them all. Spent ridiculous amounts of money going to see all of them. When I was growing up, I wasn't into all that stuff. I was into prog rock of the 70s. I was into Tom Waits. I was into Laurel and Hardy. I was into Bruce Springsteen and Frasier. And looking back, I realized that there's a lot of stuff in there that nobody thinks of these things as queer, but obviously I saw something in them to attach myself to when I was a horrible little closeted twat, and I decided to explore it all a bit, and this is the result. It's a nice breezy read. I'm told it was. I'm told it was well worth $10.99. So yeah, pick it up. You should. If you had a book, I'd read it.